Now, for more analysis on the story, I'm joined by senior researcher from Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, Jeenah. Naeem, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The peace talks and time aren't healing or even gaining momentum as we see what continues to transpire now with this latest attacks this weekend. There's no breakthrough when it comes to negotiations and discussions between the groups backed by the US, of course. The last talks that happened in Cairo also reached a deadlock. But it's 10 months now since October 7, almost a year, and we're not seeing an end in sight. It appears that it's actually expanding.
Yes, I mean, clearly, at the center of, so there's a number of different moving parts here. At the center of it is Israel and the Israeli government, which is on the one hand intent on continuing its genocide in Gaza, and therefore not accepting any ceasefire proposal that's on the table. I mean, even you might remember that on the 31st of May, Joe Biden announced a ceasefire proposal, which he claimed came from the Israelis. The Israelis never announced that they accepted that. That was the proposal that went to the UN Security Council, was adopted as a resolution. The Israelis have not accepted that. In fact, the recent response was that the UN headquarters should be wiped off the face of the earth. That's what the ambassador said. And now there's a new proposal that's being put forward. So when the previous one, the resistance movements in Gaza accepted it. Now there's a new one being put forward by the Americans because the Israelis refused to accept the previous one. And the new one is completely unacceptable to any Palestinians. It essentially is a long-term occupation of Gaza, and no Palestinians would accept that. But even this one, the Israeli government has not said that they accept it. Anthony Blinken, the American, said that he was told by Netanyahu that the Israelis accept it, but that's what we were told before. The Israelis themselves have not said so. So on the one hand, you have an Israel that's intent on pursuing its genocide, and just the events of the past few days in Gaza with scores of people being massacred, with no place being safe, as the UN has said, in Gaza, and that's on the one side. On the other side, Israel is also intent on escalating the situation into a regional war. And so you found in April, for example, when they bombed an Iranian consulate in Damascus, then a few weeks ago when they assassinated the Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr and a number of other Hezbollah commanders and fighters, as well as the head of Hamas in the Iranian capital, in Tehran, trying to push the region into a regional war, which they believe that they would prevail in such a war, and that's really very debatable. But they would also like to pull the Americans into a regional war. No one in the region wants a regional war except Israel. And Israel is going all out to ensure that that happens. So what we saw taking place yesterday on Sunday, the Hezbollah response was a very measured response to the assassination of its commander, measured, precise. It ensured that no civilians were in the way of their missiles, etc. And essentially thereafter said that we are now done. It depends, of course, on how the Israelis respond, and the Israelis, as I say, are intent on a war. There's also, we expect some kind of a response from Iran after the assassination in Tehran. So, yeah, we wait and see.
Yeah, and as you're mentioning, you just said there, no one wants an escalation of this war in the Middle East but Israel. Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been reported to telling his cabinet that this is not the final word in that campaign against Hezbollah. But also we've got the Lebanese Prime Minister who called an emergency meeting and said that this escalation needs to stop. So clearly as to your point, nobody else really wants this. But I wanted to talk about, you mentioned that a broken telephone kind of scenario that happened with US President Joe Biden as well, communicating for Israel, and then Israel saying, no, we actually didn't say that. Is the US the right country to be leading these peace talks, these negotiation talks between Israel and whether it's Lebanon, Iran or Palestine, considering the role that they've previously played in also backing Israel in this?
No, absolutely. The U.S. is not the right. The U.S. is not neutral. It's not an objective party. It enables the genocide in Gaza. If the U.S. stopped supplying tomorrow, stopped supplying Israel with weapons, that genocide will come to a grinding halt. But the U.S. continues to do so to the tune of billions of dollars, and some of the heaviest weaponry that can be supplied. I mean, those 2,000-pound bombs that have been dropped by the Israelis on schools and refugee shelters in the past couple of weeks, and hospitals, all come from the United States. So the United States is not objective. It's not a good kind of mediator in this regard. But it is the only party that we assume, the only party that the Israelis will listen to, except that the Israelis don't care what the Americans say, and the Americans are not willing to exercise the influence that they do have. They keep saying things like, we don't want a regional war, there shouldn't be civilian casualties, but then they keep supplying the weaponry to enable that to happen.
Naeem, Jeenah, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing your expertise with us.